So I'm just going to go over a little bit about how my system is set up here. I have the RCA cables running through, and this is directly hooked up to the head unit. It doesn't have a line out converter attached to it. It's just straight hooked to the head unit outputs for the rear speakers. I have 2 ohm stable on 2 woofers, and it's a 2 ohm stable amplifier. I have 4 gauge, both ground and power. The remote wire running off to that side of the vehicle. That's not hooked up to anything. Did have it running each speaker per amplifier. I just didn't like the output on it. So I'm going to show you where I grounded the grounds here. Actually gives you a better ground. It's the factory ground, so there was no drilling or adding any extras. That's the factory ground for the actual vehicle. You can see the ground wire coming out of there, and I just attached my own grounds down into it. The vehicle came with this distribution for the positive wires, so I was able to just have this one is what's going to the secondary amp, the one that's not attached, and this one's going to the amp that's actually attached, where I could just put it straight into the distribution there. And I have them running through my fuse holder for the one. I think the other fuse holder is down in here somewhere. Oh yeah, here it is. So it's just that type. They have 40 amps on each of them. Then I just ran it down underneath the vehicle instead of through the vehicle. If you want to know where to run it through the vehicle, if you come through here, here's the front of your engine, and you come down, it's about on the right hand side center. You can see that opening right there. That's where I used to have my wire running through. Trying to run both of the wires through there was about impossible, and so I decided to just run through the bottom of the vehicle, which I'll show you here. Kind of hard to show you exactly, but it's running down through there and then just running along, and it's piggybacked off of the fuel line with just some zip ties, and that falls all the way down. And then I brought it up through the trunk. You can kind of see where the plug is right there. And what I was able to do was, there's a plug in the trunk, and just put a hole through the plug and then put the plug back through. You can kind of see where it goes without taking the subs out. And there's each of the wires coming through, and then just hooking up to the amplifiers here. So here I just have the leads going to a digital multimeter, just showing what I have the voltages at the battery, which is 12.13. It's just hooked up to both the positive and the negative, just showing me what my voltage will be. Here I have the voltage showing 12.2, 12.1, and that's just hooking straight up to the positive and negative terminals on the actual amplifier. So what, 0.1, let's see, 0.03 off. Now here I'm going to show that I have it grounded, the terminal lead to the digital multimeter. And I'm going to check if there's any voltage drop from the ground, and it doesn't show that there is any. Now I'm going to give you an idea of how you can hook up your RCA straight to the speaker outputs for your head unit. This is going to be between the head unit and the amplifier, your stock amplifier for your vehicle. What you can do is, you have here your 2 terminal leads, and what you're going to do is you're going to cut off one side. So here's one side, your left and your right, or your right or your left, whatever one you have it on. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut those off. So here I have them cut off, and you don't need those anymore. So what you're going to do is you're going to strip those back so you can get to the wires. And this is a different kind of RCA cable. It's not going to be the same kind that you have. It's for a different kind of connection. It was just one that I don't use. Here's with one cut back already. You can see that the ground wire is usually going to be the one that's exposed, and then you'll have your positive wire, and that's going to be the one that's going to be in this this other sheathing. So you have to strip that back as well, and then I'll have that one stripped back and show you them both. Okay, here they are stripped back. Notice how I left a little bit on the positive wire, the middle one, on each of those. That's just to separate the ground and the positive. You don't want those touching, and you're going to attach these to either you can directly attach this, or you can put a speaker wire between this and the head unit output. What you're going to want is probably have a speaker wire between these two. That kind of gives you a little bit of extra length, and it also are really small wires. You're probably not going to get a really good connection off of these, so you're going to want something a little bit beefier, and I'll show you that now. So here we have the positive and negative hooked up. So yeah, they're not touching. You can use any method that you want to put these together, but usually these wires are going to be really small, so using a butt connector or something like that is probably going to be a little bit difficult. You can solder these together if you'd like. I don't really suggest soldering. It messes with your resistance, but I like to just tape them together. So that's what you have before you put them together, that's what you have after you put them together, and then I'll show you how it connects to the head unit. So here's the pins, here's the harness for the 04 to 05. This is going to be the one that's going to be attached to the radio on the back. Here's all the other clips for it, and here's where the radio was. So this harness looks a little bit different than the 06 to 08, which is the one that I have it hooked up to. This is a different vehicle. So just showing you on this one so I didn't have to undo everything on mine. This one here is actually a little bit more defined. You can actually see the purple and the pink. Those are going to be your positive wires. And then on the back here is going to be your blue and supposedly light green, but they look both like they're blue. Well, no, I guess that is a light green. So it's going to be that blue and that kind of off green color. So what you're going to do is, this is going to be the positive side, this is going to be the negative side, and in order to tap into those without cutting them or doing anything, you're going to take off this clip here where my thumb is at on that side, and there's a clip on that side. See if I can do it with one hand, give you an idea of what I'm doing here. So all that I'm doing is coming down, going inside, and separating that clip. Let's put it on something more solid. Right there, that might work. Yeah, I'm not that skilled. I'll be back. Okay, so what I did here was I went on this side and I got in and I opened it. Then I went on this side, I got in, opened it, and now that it's open, it should just open up. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your positive side of your speaker wires, you're going to stick it straight down in between there. So you're going to put it in behind and into there, and the same on this side. You're going to put it in and into there. So you should be able to see the wires on both of these sides here. You have to do them pretty short, so about the same length as you can see here, about the length of my flathead here. And when they sit down in there, you have to hold them both at the same time as you close this back up. So when you close this back up, it'll clip in and it'll hold those two tight down into the harness there. Okay, so I got the wires cut here. That's going to be for your left and your right. If you're going to a mono, it doesn't really matter, but if you're going to do your left and right channel, the pink is going to be your left, and this purple violet, or purple, whatever one you want to call it, so it's going to be your right channel. So whatever channel you're going to have for each of these speaker wires, you're going to make sure that you're going to do those ones. So the positive for each of these are on this side. What you're going to do is you're going to put them together like this. Make sure that they're small. You don't want them to be too long because otherwise they'll stick out and you don't want them to touch each other in the process. So you're just going to stick them down in and see how they sit down in there. And then once they're sitting down in there, you're just going to close up the lid on them. And I'll need both my hands for that. Okay, so just give them a little tug. Make sure that they don't come out of there. Seem to be in there pretty good. Make sure that they're not touching. And we'll go over that as well too to make sure that they're really not touching, that there's no, that they're not actually touching together. You want to be careful also and make sure that you don't have little pieces sticking out like that. If you do, you're going to want to redo it. Just make sure that you get them in there really good and make sure that none of them are coming out and touching, because then that'll interfere with your, it'll interfere with it. Okay, now we're on the back side here. This is going to be your negative wires, and I went ahead and did it so that you can see which ones they're going to be. They're going to be these two, not this blue one, but it's going to be the 5 and number 6. So if you're counting from the left to the right, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5, and number 6. I think these are 15 and 16, and the front are 5 and 6. And so we're going to take out also the sleeve on this one. This sleeve is going to be a little bit different. So let's see. When you get it out, if I can get it. There we go. So this one, you're going to actually have to pull out even further and get behind it. Pull it all the way out. So now this one gives you a lot of working room. And these wires you're going to do a little bit longer. You could actually stick them down in further, so it's not going to be the same restraint that you had before. So you got a lot of room in there to work with. And these ones are pretty separated. They still do touch in the bottom there, so you're still going to have to be careful with it. And I'll show you how that goes together. Okay, so make sure that you have the correct sides. So this one is going to be on the right. That's going to be attached to the purple, and the purple is going to go to this supposed light green color. And you just stick it in. And then the same on this side. Make sure that your terminals are twisted really well so they stick in there and they don't separate. Same thing on this side. You really want to make sure that they're not having pieces like that sticking out, but we'll take care of that later. So once you got them both in there, they're both stuck in there, you can go ahead and check. Get it to focus. So then what we're going to do from here is just close it up. Okay, make sure that they don't stick out like this one, how that one came out. Yeah, they kind of come out a little easy. So what I did with these ones when I got them in was I duct taped or electrical taped them around so that they're in there pretty solid. Like I said, you don't want to go down in too far, because if you go down in too far, it actually opens up, so they could contact each other. You can see in the sleeve how far down you can go, so I'll get that taken care of here. Okay, since it's important to make sure that you don't have any of these wires touching, what we're going to do is put our digital multimeter on, what do you call that? Continuity. So we're going to look for continuity, just make sure, well, first we'll make sure that it works. So we're going to touch. You should hear that beep if it's touching. If there's any wires that are touching together, you'll hear those beeps. So here's the other side, and here's the other side. So I made sure that none of the wires were touching on that one, and then I'm going to attach this wire to this wire and then do the same thing with these two. Okay, so I took it off of this wire because we've already checked these 3 wires to this wire and none of them are connected together. So just make sure that we're still getting it working. Then we're going to touch and touch. And we're not getting anything, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach that to this wire, and then we'll check between these two. Okay, so we've already tried these two. They're not attached to anything, so those are good. Now we're going to make sure that these two aren't attached to each other, and we get nothing. I'm going to make sure that it still works. Still works. Alright, so now that we know that the wiring harness is set up properly, we can attach these to the RCA cables if they're not already attached, and then the RCA cable will just go straight back to your amplifier. You want to make sure that you do this coming out of the head unit because it gives off a really low voltage. So what you're doing with the line out converter is converting that high voltage to low voltage. So if you're going to be coming off of the stock amplifier, which is this guy here, it's going to be these wires down here. You're probably going to get a pretty high voltage because it's boosting the voltage through your amp, and when you get that higher voltage you're going to have to convert it down because you're going to be anywhere between 0.25 volts to or 0.2 volts all the way up to 8 volts. And so if it's anything over that and your amp can't handle, or if your amp doesn't handle anywhere between those voltages, then you're gonna have to step it down. And if you try to do a line out converter from here, you're already at a low voltage. You're looking at around a volt tops coming out of here, and that's on full max volume. And so if you're trying to do 1 volt out of here and you're doing a line out converter, is going to drop it way down. You're going to be down in the lower 0.0 numbers, so your amp's probably not even going to be able to handle that low voltage to step it up to give you what you'd normally get if you were to just run the straight RCA cable straight to it. So let's find out what the voltage is coming out of my system, and then I'll show you how to check it with the speakers all disconnected. And you're going to disconnect your amp. If everything's already hooked up, you're going to disconnect your amplifier, you're going to disconnect all of your door speakers and everything, and then that way you can run the full range and you're not going to have to worry about clipping any of your speakers in the process. Okay, it's pretty easy to get to the amplifier to disconnect all the speakers. Pretty sure you're all familiar with it. Let's see if I can get it with one hand. Normally just come in here and make a fist, try to get it to pull out, but probably gonna need both hands to get it. I'll come back to that. Okay, I don't know how people do it one-handed with all the things that people can do. I'm just not there yet. So what we're doing is we're underneath the stereo here, and we're just gonna go through and disconnect the amp there. Okay, so the easiest way to get to it is just to get a flathead and pry down and out. Gotta make sure you get on the tab. Let's see if we can get up in there. Got enough room for us both. Okay, so now that that's disconnected, we're not going to get anything coming out of the speakers. We will still out of the subwoofer because I still have that hooked up, but we'll... So what I like to do is I like to turn everything up to where I like to listen to it. So my settings are going to be 30. And I like to go bass 1, treble 6, and then centered out. So yours are probably going to be different. It depends on whatever you listen to, wherever you like it at. And Maybe even go just a little bit higher, just to make sure that if you accidentally overshoot where you like to be, that you're still covered and you're not going to have any problems. And then I'll grab the RCA cables here, and what we're going to do is we're going to run on our digital multimeter. I have a AC DC, so if I push that down, it goes into AC, and then my AC voltage and DC voltage are on the same. The squiggly line is for the AC voltage and at about 200 volts. And then we'll come back and grab out the RCA cables. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check out what's coming out of it. And I have a so what I do is I actually play Bluetooth off of my phone, and I downloaded just make sure that it's connected. So yeah, the Bluetooth is connected, and then I just got done downloading a tone generator. Now I found that around 55-60 hertz is going to give you the highest voltage, and that's what you're looking for, like at the highest peak. And so with the 60 hertz, let's play it and see if it comes through. So what you're going to do is you're going to hook up your positive and negative to your RCA leads. So there's the positive and there's the negative. And then if you look here, you can see it's 0.9 volts. So let's go down. There we go. Make sure we still have our leads touching, positive to negative. Really doesn't matter which side that you have, as long as you have one positive, one negative. And we're going to do this to both. So there I have, the outside is the negative and the inside's the positive. This only goes for 30 seconds. So 30-second hertz. And we're jumping up to 1.03. Now, if we go back and we adjust down to 30, and we go back to our normal setting, let's see what we get out of it now. So we're at 0.84. And then the tone generator just stopped. So now that was with one side. Let's check out the other side. So we're going to change it from the red to the blue. Going to hook up our positive and our negative. Again, maybe. Okay, so we got our positive, negative hooked up, and we're going to play, and we're going to see what goes out. So 0.86. I think that's exactly what the other one was at. So we know that it's running 0.86 volts at its highest peak at 60 hertz. We can change and see if any of these are running different. Like, let's try 90 hertz. And stop that, and then play, and it's running 0.84. and I think if we go lower, let's try 35 hertz, and 40 hertz. So let's play. Let's see what we get out of there. So 0.84. And you can kind of just keep messing around, see what your peak is going to be at. So we know that we're getting around 0.84 out of these RCA cables. So I'd say at 0.9 is probably going to be your max. Unfortunately for my stereo or my amplifier, I can't get it to go in different increments. So the only options that it gives me is going to be, let's see, 0.1 all the way up to 8 volts. So knowing I'm at 0.9 max, I'm probably going to want it at 1 volt. And then that way I know that if anything plays through here, that it's not going to actually go above and beyond that. So I know that it's not going to be clipping, it's not going to be popping.